how do you respond to people who, pull out that book of excuses and lay out why they just can't pursue their heart's purpose? Now that you've had the word of, that knowledge bomb dropped on you by a loving friend, and you've gone through and followed through, what counsel do you have to give to those folks who open that book of excuses and just kind of start reading off why they can't?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Heath is actually kind of notorious for doing this around our group of friends in Austin. He's giving me this look right now, like, what are you talking about? But he will often be the person that will sit you down and like rally for you to,
quit your job.
Yeah, quit your job, follow your dream, do whatever it is that you've been talking about. Because Heath says that he's an idea guy, but he's definitely like a huge encourager to like get people get up off the couch, like go do what you're passionate about. Like, is there anything that's actually big enough to hold you back from this?
Yeah, I think there's two big things that I would say. And one for me was that I did want to be a writer. I really did. That's something I've always wanted to do. Growing up, I wanted to play pro baseball, be a writer, and be an inventor. And during college, I started a clothing line, so you could say I invented something. I played college baseball, and I'll call that good enough. And then being a writer was, the thing that I've always wanted to do. And I was keeping a blog back in Austin, but it was really at nights and weekends. I'd try to crank out a blog in the morning, and then I'd go to my day job working software sales. And then but if I didn't get it done, then I was okay with that because I still had a paycheck coming in. And so eventually I reached the point where I told Alyssa, I was like, hey, babe, if I'm going to do this whole writing thing, not only should I be living this life that I'm trying to inspire other people to live, this courageous, adventurous life, living a good life, but I need to have my back up against the wall. I need to be able to go all into this because this whole nights and weekends thing isn't cutting it. I need to crash and burn while I'm young and can bounce back and not have any regrets about this. And so that was one thing, is that if you feel like it's unrealistic for you to do everything all at once and you're young enough and don't have the responsibilities at this time to be able to go and do something, why not? At that time, I realized that the worst thing that could happen to me was I go out, we attempt to do this crazy cross-country journey, we fail at it and come back home with tons of lessons learned on how to do it better. And so I really looked at it as there wasn't a lot of scenarios where unless we died, there wasn't that many bad things that could have happened, as far as just, worrying about failing or not having opportunities. Now that I've finished this trip, I'm able to cash in on way more opportunities than I would have ever had before. And the other thing I would say is that all the green lights are never going to align. All the stars are never going to give you some sign that now is the right time to go. I think that's the biggest excuse for people. The timing's not right, or, I don't have the money, or I don't, I have a job and responsibilities, all that crap. And so I would just say that, like, I was about to get married, and that's a terrible time to go because most people want to have their things in order. And I'm working with a guy right now named Jia Jung, who has a blog called fearbuster.com. He did something called 100 Days of Rejection. He got a book published through Random House, and he's got this incredible story of overcoming his fear of rejection through intentionally seeking rejection. And this all started when he was building his company, and he quit his job 4 days before his son was born. So I hear story after story of people who took these big risks, and I'm sure there are tenfold the amount of people who have failed. But the whole point is, nobody's ever going to come up to you, hand you a piece of paper and say, now is the day that you quit your job, leave to go and pursue some big dream or idea. That just doesn't happen. You're like, the moment that you realize that you're the only thing that's holding yourself back from doing something awesome, that's the day where, that's a huge blessing. And that happened for both of us. We realized that we're ultimately have complete autonomy over this thing, and that if we don't make this a priority in our lives, nobody else will. So
yeah, I think we could take up a collection, sing a song. Good sermon. Preach it, baby.
Thank you. I haven't been holding that back, so
I don't think you have. When you approached a business about working for a day, obviously it was something that benefited your project. I mean, it was your interest. But it was also a way to give that business some media exposure in a really positive light as well. a win-win. But some business owners didn't see it that way. Well, as many people in life often overlook opportunities that get presented. What are some lessons that you learned out of those times of rejection? Since you were talking about rejection there, did the way in which you framed those rejections change over the course of your journey?
Yeah, they definitely did. And so obviously I learned, one of the biggest things I learned was from that was just that the importance of finding your right customer. And so by the end of our trip, we could roll into a town and I could make 2 phone calls and I would get a job from those 2 phone calls. And this would be literally saying, hey, can I come in and work at your business? Not a month from now, but literally, will you hire me on the spot? You've never met me tomorrow. And I had a 50% success rate. And that is not even an exaggeration. How I did that was that over time throughout our trip, I realized who was receptive to this message. What kind of businesses were we looking for? What was our mission? We gained social proof in being featured in places like CNN and Fox News and Huffington Post. And so we gained that social proof that said, like, we're only a little bit crazy and you can believe in what we're doing. And then also, I would look at a company's Facebook. I would look at the reviews on Google. I'd look at their website. Did they have some kind of bigger mission outside of a business? How did they present themselves? Do they look fun and young and interactive, or do they look like more of a boring, stiff business? And it's not always super easy to tell. But in the beginning, I would just pick up the phone and cold call like hotels or any business I could possibly call and not do any of the research. And it took me days. I remember we were in Vegas for a week and I never found like a good job. I ended up finding it through our sponsor company and I had to go do a 3-day lifeguard certification, basically all because I had trouble finding a job. And I'd call people and you can only imagine getting a phone call during the middle of the day with this pitch. Hey, my name's Heath Padgett and I'm traveling around the country. I'm working a different job in every state. And I'm filming a documentary with my wife and it's called Hourly America. And we'd love to, feature you guys in our film. I want to come in and just work for the day as a worker for you. You can treat me like a, blah, blah, blah. Basically, I have like this pitch that looked pretty similar to that. And I refined it over time. And then I realized a lot of other little things such as, I need to call businesses either before 7 or 8 a.m. or after 6 or 7 p.m. in the evenings and leave them a voicemail and then follow up with an email. That was my go-to success rate and getting a hold of people because I realized a lot of the places I called, like small businesses, they're really busy during the day and they don't have time to process some crazy requests. So whether or not they may have been super open to what I was doing, but you hear a 30-second pitch like that, I was trying to sell them on me, even though it could have been a good opportunity for them. Some people would just say no thanks without even looking into it. Other ones would be like, are you for real right now? Like, let's do this. This sounds awesome. And so I think that you just learn that it's more about them than you. And that, those are kind of some of the few things that I learned during that process.
I'm just finishing reading a book right now called The Kindness Project. I don't know if you heard of this guy's adventure. Anyway, Leon got a motorcycle with a sidecar and literally drove it around the world without any money.
Wow.
He relied entirely upon the kindness or gifts of strangers to buy gas, to buy food, to put him up every night. And that whole project around kindness, relying on kindness and then giving back kindness. He had money that he could help people with, but he refused to spend it on himself, only to donate it to other people. But quite an eye-opening view of someone who's relying on kindness and the chutzpah and the process of learning how to ask with a lot of humility. An interesting book, also in relation to what you've done as well.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
I'll put the book in the show notes. Talk a little bit about some of the fears you're struggling with now. You touched on those earlier, and I want to dig back just briefly into some of that. How do they show up now that you've accomplished some of the things on your bucket list? What are you dealing with, and what's keeping you from moving forward on some of those at this point, if any?
When you're a kid, you have a diary, and you write down these really cool things that have happened in your life, and then you come back years later and you read it, and you're like, "Wow, I was so stupid. Like, I sound so dumb. Like, I can't believe I wrote these things down or I cared about these things." And that's kind of like the phenomena I have in my head right now of going through and like watching all this footage that I filmed, because I started out, I know I had no idea what I was doing. And I just, was running around with this camera, didn't know how to use it yet or anything like that. I mean, we got the camera in the mail on our wedding day, and we worked our first job in that first week. And so didn't have a lot of time to figure it out. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now, is that now I kind of feel like I know how to work a camera. In my last few jobs that I filmed, I think got some really, good shots, maybe, I don't know. But when you go back and you watch all this other stuff, you just get this feeling like, man, like I was so bad. I didn't know what I was doing. This is so stupid. Like I can't use any of this footage that I use. And that's kind of like the biggest fear right now. And Heath kind of touched on that earlier, is that we're so afraid of just watching it and seeing where we've messed up, and not knowing how do we fix this, how do we make it okay, and figuring out how to edit it at all, because we did learn a little bit about editing, and we've edited some videos while we've been on the road, but I mean, that's not our skill set. We're writers. We move around commas and apostrophes. We don't move around audio clips and learn how to splice them all together. You know more about that, Charles, than we do. And so it's just like this big fear of, so yeah, we did jump in and start writing full time and get paid to write and get paid to film this documentary. But now comes the point of actually editing it, and I don't know why we feel all this fear now. And maybe we did feel it then whenever we jumped in with both feet on trying these new things. But now I think this is the final product, and this is what people are going to see. And what if they see it and they realize that we were faking it for so long, that we were imposters, like we talked about earlier. And so there's a lot of fear with that.
Yeah, and I think the more eyeballs that are on you too, even though we don't have like a ton of eyeballs on us, but just being on national TV a couple of times, or being on a couple interviews, or having multiple people say, I'm looking forward to your documentary, knowing that people are going to actually watch it is kind of terrifying in a way, because it just is. I think that's the reason why it's supposed to take you years of working on a craft before people ever notice you. And I think for our writing, we have been working on that craft for years. And then so for the film, it's a little bit scary, because there's a lot of intimidation that goes with knowing that people are going to see something that you put out there when your craft hasn't necessarily earned that audience, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Somewhat with the podcast. I know diddly about audio, and I'm stumbling my way, I hope, forward, but more stumbles than there are strides. Yeah, I get it. What was the best advice that you were given along the way but did not take?
Ooh.
That's tough.
That's really tough. Because we definitely get a lot of advice. People love to give us advice.
No doubt.
What do you think?
Gosh, can we circle back to that one?
Well, actually, I don't know if this is like the best advice, but this is definitely advice that we didn't take, is that people kind of tell you, like, when you're like, slow down and enjoy the moment. I think a lot of people probably told us that along the road that we just were like, whatever, like, we're trying to go to 50 states in our first year of marriage. Like, we kind of gotta hurry. We gotta move along. Our RV tops out at like 55. So like, we gotta keep moving if we want to make it. And so, we definitely didn't always move slowly. I mean, in October, we did 11 states. And granted, that was like the Northeast, where states are like tiny. They're not Texas size, like what we're used to. But we were moving so quickly, and there were so many days where we didn't get out and enjoy ourselves. We just kind of, we did our work, and we did the normal monotonous routine that we have with RVing, and we didn't make those days memorable. And I think that was at least the biggest mistake. I think that if we could do it again, we would do it much slower and try to enjoy the process more.
I agree with that.
Yeah, that resonates. Early in our career, we traveled around the world, not extensively, but a moderate amount, through Asia, on a couple of trips in Europe, shooting projects. And when we were finished, or we got back, I remember the entire trip based on still images. Linda remembered it by food and by relationships and conversations and experiences because I was shooting pictures while she was embracing culture and